Hi, I'm Alana Hippensteel from Pharmacy Times. This week is National Brain Awareness Week, and I'm here with Dr. Caroline Carney, the Chief Medical Officer of Magellan Health and a board certified psychiatrist, to discuss some of the issues relating to the contemporary understanding of mental health and brain health and how they are treated today. So, Dr. Carney, why may there be a poor understanding of mental health and brain health in the U.S. today? In your view?
I think it's because there, in general, is some confusion even about what the definitions of brain health might be. So, depending on who your resource is, whether it's the World Health Organization or the Center for Disease Control, or even the American Heart Association, brain health is considered many different things. But I think what it has in common in all of those definitions are that brain health refers to cognitive abilities, emotional abilities, mental health, behavioral abilities, our abilities to learn and think and have a strong memory. And so all of those are conceptually very strongly related to each other. And in the field of psychiatry and in neurology, we all see that one cannot really separate brain health from emotional or mental health.
Right, right. So in that way, they're similar, but would treatment and research for both brain health and mental health, are they similar fields?
It really depends on what the end topic is that one is reviewing and how far into the brain the researcher wants to go. So, if you look at the brain ultimately as the source of where all emotions and mental and cognitive responses come from, at the end of any kind of research, there is the capacity ultimately to look at the brain, whether it's in how the brain functions in terms of neurotransmitters and brain chemicals, or in systems in the brain and how they light up and work with different stimuli, whether those are emotional laden content or whether it is, say, in the depressed brain or the brain with dementia.
Right. What are some of the ways that brain health and the health of the body are approached differently in modern medicine? And why might these differences potentially pose challenges?
I think over time, in less than modern medicine, they were really considered separate constructs. That we had mind health and body health, and never the two were brought together. As time has progressed and medicine has advanced, I think it is really commonly held that the brain and the body are part of one fully functional system and are not considered separately.
Mm, right, right. And what are some of the challenges relating to conducting research on brain health?
There are many challenges, and so it starts with what the definition is of that topic that the research might be on, or what the outcomes might be on, and the many confounders that can occur along the way. So let's take an example of doing research in a condition like Alzheimer's dementia. Researchers must first peel away what other effects from other medical conditions might be contributing to some of the end state seen in Alzheimer's. They also must consider what the effects of conditions like depression or anxiety might do in terms of creating the end state. And finally, they have to look at all of the kinds of components of our activities of daily living. Is someone using substances? Is someone getting enough sleep? Is someone getting enough exercise? So, all of those kinds of things can figure into ultimately how our brain works and performs at the end of the day. So, if I'm doing a study, say, on a new medication for Alzheimer's disease, I need to know that all of those other factors are controlled for, and that presents a challenge.
Right, yeah. What are some potential opportunities for future research into brain health on the horizon?
There are all sorts of great opportunities out there. So, if we start with some of the ideas that we have around what leads to great brain health. We can do research in areas of brain training, if you will. The brain acts as a muscle, so how much of training and what kind of training really can lead to longer term brain health. There's great research to be done in the areas of sleep, exercise, and diet in the contribution of brain health. In the terms of behavioral and emotional health, the field is wide open to look at everything from medications and therapy used to treat emotional and behavioral conditions and where and how those affect the brain, what role the brain plays in that, the role of the brain in creating emotions and memory. And so through functional MRI studies, PET scan studies, studies looking at the response to virtual reality, like I said, psychotherapy or medications. There's just so much great research that is being done today and yet to get done.
And what are some areas you would like to see investigated further specifically in the brain health field? Perhaps an area that hasn't been focused on as much that you would like to see come to the fore?
I think one of the most obvious ones right now will be research into the effects of COVID, the longer term effects of COVID on the brain, and trying to tease out how much of it is related to the viral infection itself on brain structures and inflammation versus how much of it is related to the trauma of having been critically, perhaps fatally ill versus how much of it is related just to all of the changes in lifestyle that the world has lived through in the last year. So it will be a very complex area to try to sort through, but one that's really critically needed. It will provide insight not only into how COVID has affected our ultimate brain health and emotional health, but how other viral processes and perhaps other inflammatory diseases affect health as well.
How may the COVID-19 pandemic have impacted treatment and research in the brain health?
Sure. The pandemic itself has affected many individuals' ability to get in to see their providers. So imagine then trying to get individuals to continue to be part of an enrollment in a clinical trial. And so we know that during the time of COVID, two things have happened. There was a huge shift, as very much needed to occur, into putting a great deal of time, money, and resources into work on finding treatments and vaccinations for COVID, pulling research away and some of those great minds away from research that might have been done, say, in healthy brain and emotions. Um, People have had a challenge getting into clinical trials and maintaining clinical trials because of staying away from providers' offices or research offices per se. And we have all sorts of confounders leading to that right now, including all of the individuals who became ill with COVID and all of the downstream emotional components of COVID. Those, as I mentioned earlier, really contribute to what might be happening in the brain at that time, maybe confounding some studies getting done. I think that the research community as a whole has been as facile as it can be, learning new methods of reaching out to engage people and continuing to include individuals in clinical trials.
Do you think there may be any lasting impacts from the pandemic on brain health or the brain health field?
Both. So, as I mentioned earlier, the research into brain health and the outcome of COVID on the brain is ongoing. The initial signs have shown that in individuals who may have had COVID earlier on in the pandemic, that they're still suffering from depression and perhaps low energy and loss of some cognitive function, likely related to that. But as I mentioned earlier, we really have to sort out what part is virus versus all of the other things that can contribute to that. I think that COVID has really brought about the need to consider the body holistically. A respiratory disease leading, to brain inflammation, as we saw, or leading to clotting disorders that can cause changes in the brain as well. Really, I think is a great lesson in that total body health. The mind, the body, the brain cannot be separated from one another. I think the inflammatory processes associated with COVID will be great keys into better understanding the connections between inflammation and cognitive decline and depression.
Right, right. Thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me today, Dr. Carney.
Absolutely.